everyone, good evening and welcome for joining us today at the Innovation Office hosted by Birmingham Architectural Association and Alan Muir. I'm Becky Harding and I'm the Product Manager for Alan Muir and so co-hosting this with the BAA. The Birmingham Architectural Association Committee have been collaborating and developing new events with our partners and supporters, of which Alan Muir are a long-time supporter and corporate patron. The Birmingham Architectural Association is represented by architects, architectural technologists, interior designers, engineers and many more built environment professionals within the local area who have an interest in architecture. It's run by a community of people from a variety of practices based in the city, and the aim is to promote, support and share knowledge through our community. Over the past 5 months, they've been able to donate over £5,000 to the Architects Benevolent Society. The Architects Benevolent Society is hugely important to the organisation and has been supporting architecture and design students, professionals and families tirelessly over the past year. So tonight we'll be hearing from a construction and built environment group of professionals from different sectors and based across the UK. Co-chairing this with me is Ina Comas, who is from the BAA. You want to give us a wave?
Hello.
Ina. So I hope everyone's been keeping safe and resisting last minute shopping before Thursday that everybody seems to be doing at the moment. So when myself and Connor began having initial conversations about this event in September, up until that point, the unprecedented year that we'd had, I perhaps don't think we could have envisioned where we'd find ourselves today with the further challenges that we're facing within the workplace. The future of the workplace and its adaptation to COVID-19 is a concern to individuals and businesses as it affects us to the core of daily life and routine, with existing ways of working having to be reimagined. So I'm going to go through and introduce you to the panellists that we have today. So we have Charlotte Fullard, Associate at Bale Williams. Charlotte specialises in advising landlords, developers and tenants on the acquisition and disposal of business space. We have Adrian Campbell, Workplace Design at the Senator Group. Adrian works to understand how the wider impacts of age, health, education and international cultures impact the design of spaces, with boundaries blurring of what constitutes workspace. He designs spaces for workplace, healthcare, education, hospitality and sporting venues. We're joined by Graham Featon, Commercial Director, ADP Architecture. As commercial sector lead, Graham has responsibility for ADP's commercial work, strategy and business development, and manages a number of private sector clients while guiding high quality design work nationwide. With over 25 years working across office, retail, industrial, residential and hospitality sectors, Graham's approach to urban design and architecture places commercial value centre stage, recognising that excellent design underpins viable long-term investment and sensible investment is sustainable and provides real social benefits. And we've finally got Richard Powley, Director at Ten Design. Through their evolution, Ten Design have developed a unique design process which is founded upon their methodology of consult, create and inspire. This structured approach creates key stages through their process, which enables them to consistently deliver valuable information which is visually interpreted in the final design. So tonight's event, in terms of an open discussion between our panellists, is going to kick off with the lead question of tonight's event. So just as we get the conversation going, don't forget you can get involved. Please use the chat function to ask any questions that you may have, and we'll get through as many of those as we can later on. So the start question we're looking at is, with the rise in work from home over the last 6 months, is the role of the workplace to inspire innovation? So Charlotte, would you like to start us on that one?
I think in short, the answer would be yes, but obviously it's so much more than that. With working from home, yes, it's become a trend over the last 6 months, but it's one that's just been accelerated. I think many more people and businesses were embracing flexible working. And alongside that, the role of the workplace has become progressively more for innovation, which we've seen through office design, which my fellow panellists will advise on a little bit more than I will, because that's their specialism. But I think we're seeing both in terms of landlords and the space that they're providing and bringing forward, and the sort of communal areas within the building, but then also for the actual occupiers themselves. If you look at the likes of Google and Facebook and the millions of pounds that they've invested into creating innovative workspaces, it's not a new thing. It's been a growing trend over the last sort of number of years, really. In Birmingham itself, we've seen, you can't ignore the sort of rise that we've seen as serviced office providers. And I think whilst there's the degree of flexible working that they provide, they also provide innovative workspaces for people to occupy. There have been recent requirements, even this year with everything that's happened. And whilst the occupiers have looked at traditional office space, they have also favoured actually the sort of flexible approach, but it's the collaboration that you can get from those spaces as well.
Graham, something you'd like to contribute to?
Yeah, well, I think Charlotte's absolutely right. The trends that were in play before the pandemic, agile work and move to sort of, focus on well-being and mental and physical health, flexibility of leases and an increase in management, managed workplace. I think all of that has just been accelerated, massively. 10 years worth of progress probably in a few months. I think, but specifically, I think the pandemic has demonstrated that, one, we can work very effectively from home for the most part. I think it's particularly as times went on, we've realised that personally and in our business, that it's particularly useful for focused, linear, the simpler tasks. I think, and it's also favours some people over others. Tends to work better for the more senior members of staff rather than junior. But I think as time wears on, you realise there's also something quite important that's missing, and I think very difficult to quantify, and maybe won't be able to do it for a number of months or years. There's just a richness and a depth to what we, the creative side of what we do, that I think we probably just have to admit that it's maybe not quite as good as it could have been. So it's yes, we can get through the quantity, but the quality, I just think there's just something slightly lax, and if there is a role for the workplace going forward, is to try and cater for that in a bigger way, and that's about people coming together around activities and maybe particular facilities. But I think the learning, mentoring, collaborating, and brainstorming, particularly that side of our daily work needs to, the office space needs to accommodate that.
Becky, I was just going to kind of follow on from that comment, really, is that the workplace has always been there to inspire innovation. That's one of the biggest things that customers of ours have asked us to provide when creating a workplace. I think over the last 6 months, the amount of people going to offices has been minimal, and I think in the next 6-12 months, when people do start to return to work, yes, we want to innovate, but I think it's the social side that I think as humans we miss. We can do a lot through Zoom calls and interaction and things like that, but as you just mentioned there, you lose that ability to bounce off each other, and I think that's what the office really should be in the future. It's a destination for people to come together and do the things that we need to do as individuals, as teams, and as human beings. And I think that's really where I see the role of the workplace in the future. Because as you've just said, we can all be very productive at home, and we can all get through a huge amount of work. But it's that, I don't want to use a Simon Cowell phrase, but the X factor it's that bit that you miss from being with other people. So that's my part of it.
Yeah. Well, if I would, what I'd like to maybe think about is, could this, from a positive point of view, be the greatest opportunity for workplace change that might ever happen in any of our working lives? Because every single workplace globally is going to change, even if it means reduction in site. Everyone is starting to think about what the role of the workplace is, because you're quite right, people are missing those points. And the point about innovation is synonymous with creativity and problem solving. And you don't necessarily do that just sat behind a white bench in rows and rows of battery hens within a workplace. So it's making those physical changes. The physical changes, putting yourself in different postures that can help people think differently. And that's the stimulation. And maybe the working from home bit, maybe the working from home isn't an imprisonment. Maybe for those of us working in the workplace environment, it's an education process, because for the last 20 years, we've been trying to explain that in the workplace, there can be a variety of different spaces that you can use within the workplace. You just don't have to sit at a desk. But maybe now people have been working at home for 6 months. The fact that we can explain that the study, whether that's study desk, whether it's in a separate room or whether it's in a kitchen table, that study space is what you would expect to find in the workplace. That the lounge space that you mix with your family and friends with, that's what collaboration is. That most of us have in our space a formal table where at a pre-arranged time and invite, we gather to eat a meal, and that's exactly the same as a meeting room. And maybe there's the kitchen that we've always been talking about well-being, but maybe the idea of rejuvenation, refresh, health has come, and yet this is a health crisis. The role of what the kitchen action types to play, that social element to the workplace, and the fact that we've all been working in a more domestic feel will start to be, we can use that to reinforce the message that we've been talking about with what the role of the workplace is. And just one final point, for me, the interesting challenge in all of this is, how do we blend the technology in? How do we start to have an environment that we've mostly designed about being physically present in, where some of us are going to be physically present and some are going to be digitally present? And the best examples I'll give is the chat shows. Graham Norton, best chat show host out there, comes in, set in a separate seat, the power seat, puts everyone on the sofa, controls the conversation. Worst thing that's happening on the minute is it comes on 7 o'clock this evening after us, is the One Show. Because they'll speak to the person that's in front of them, and then they will physically turn their back to the person that's in them to look at the technology. And they'll look at the screen behind, and then when they're finished speaking to that person behind them on the screen, they'll do exactly the same. They'll put the back to them, which you would never do when you're in person. So for me, yes, it's about innovation, but how do we start to be innovative with getting the technical solutions right for the physical and digital workplace? So yes, it is about innovation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adrian. Ina, would you like to introduce the next question?
Sure. The next question is that, has the instant widespread adoption to working from home been due to our human ability to adapt to the failure of office design? So basically, we are trying to see if we are trying to adapt into the new working space, or you think that the office design is going to just not be enough?
Adrian, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Okay, double session. Well, working from home is, there's some of the talk from the last few years in the workplace is about there hasn't been a space to think, to focus, to concentrate, to do that individual work that still makes up 60 or 70% of our working day. It's still a large element of what we do. And that's why people have adopted working from home so easily. It has given them the space that you could argue that some office designs have not given them. So you start to think about all that ability to have your casual dress, that you've got no commute, you've got more time, everyone's on the same level. You can have your pets around you. I still have yet to find out what the protocol is about cats on desks when we're on Zoom meetings. You wouldn't do it in a formal meeting, but it's allowed now. So where does all this start to come from? So working from home, it supports confidentiality, private conversation, focus, some great things. But it also lacks some things. There is no boundary between home and work. You know, already for 20 years we've discussed the work-life balance. Now we're discussing the home-life balance. You know, it's suddenly flipped everything completely on its head. You know, where's the humour? Where's the fun? Where's the face-to-face? So when you start to think about what's missing from home, that tells you maybe what you can start to bring into the workplace, which is about the space for innovation, the space for collaboration, hosting, learning, that social workplace. And we've got to start to try and understand what that balance looks like. And for me, one of the things that we could say is that in terms of social distancing, maybe that's a good thing for office design. Because when you think about COVID is an issue about air and space, the most human of things, the air and the space. And over the last few years, it's all been office design about the maximum efficiency. How many people can we put into a space? 1,600 wide desks, the space for that and the person is about 3 square meters, let alone when you start going down to 1,400 wide desks. Most buildings, the mechanical and electrical, the air conditioning is designed on 1 person every 10 square meters. So that's why we feel tired at 2 o'clock in buildings. We breathe the air. And that's why now there's this starting to think about maybe social distancing is not a bad thing for office design as we start to think about effectiveness of space rather than just efficiency and how many people can we sort of like just maximally max packs in a battery hen. So no, I do think there has been an element of failure of office design, but working from home does not replace what the role of the workplace is about. Thank you.
So would anyone else want to collaborate with us into the discussion?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'd add to that is whilst, yes, loads of people have done really well at adopting working from home, we have to remember that the majority have actually been forced to do it. It wasn't necessarily by choice. We were all told to work from home. Not everybody has had to work from home because they've been furloughed, again, not by their choice. So it doesn't just come back to human adaptability and the office design. I don't think that there's a lot more to it. And not everybody is adapted to it very well. And I think at the beginning of lockdown, there were so many surveys that everybody was like, yeah, much prefer working from home. Let's close all the offices. We'll all go home. We can all work like this. But so many people just can't. So I know that, Adrian, you commented about sort of confidentiality and things like that. Well, that's great for, you know, I'm very lucky. I've got an office at, you know, a dedicated room at home that's almost in my own office, but lots of people are in shared houses. I think the impact on, I don't want to sound old, but the impact on probably the younger generation, just in terms of things that they can pick up from working in an office and that interaction with older colleagues and things like that. There's so many factors to be considered with it.
Ian?
Can I just, a couple of things. I suppose I think humans have adapted. I think technology has helped us adapt very well to the situation very quickly. But the buildings, I do think there were trends in office design, and I don't mean sort of interior design. I mean architecture and urban design probably more than office or workplace design itself. I think. To a certain extent, we were building offices in the wrong place, or we were, you know, defining zones entirely for offices, whether that's the square mile of London or, you know, most city centres have a kind of office zone that is dead after 5 o'clock, you know, and I hope there's, I don't quite know how it'll translate, but I hope that there's there's a change in the way we think about offices, and it's to do with, as Adrian mentioned, sort of blurring the boundaries between workplace and everything else. You know, can we get our cities to be more than singular monocultures? You know, and I just think surely this move to work from home it will lead to a bit of a renaissance in sort of secondary areas, in suburban areas that we're just monoculture. You know, we just travelled into city centres. That commute, nobody, no matter how much they like their workplace and their colleagues, enjoy that, you know, torturous commute. So, you know, surely we've got to find better places for our workplaces. I think I add to that there's maybe a few trends, you know, that have led to offices being a very bespoke solution. You know, they're a kind of lollipop, a very tall building with a single core, with a very deep plan. You know, no openable windows, and they're not the most adaptable often. I think if you go to Central Europe and Northern Europe, you have a slightly better model that is a shallower plan and maybe a slightly lower, you know, 5 or 6 stories that people are encouraged to use the stairs. And so I can see a number of trends leading towards something that is, you know, high density still, but smaller. And I think, you know, the object buildings, you know, the walkie-talkie, the shard, whatever it is, that kind of trend towards objects is also not particularly helpful and not particularly adaptable. But I think interesting, and I think Adrian mentioned as well that just something quickly on density. The initial reaction is that, well, you know, we've got, let's say, half of our people are working from home, or you know, on balance, we don't need office space quite to the extent that we would have. However, if we are talking about more collaborative work being appropriate for the office, then actually the density for that, you know, density of a conference room is an awful lot more than the density of desks. So actually, I don't see the density necessarily changing. I think in the short term, as big companies on long leases accept that half of their staff are going to be working from home, then clearly they're going to have to work on a lower density model for a period. But I think when those leases renew, there will be a change, and there will be a consolidation of space. Now, the question is whether or not this, you know, I'm hoping that there might be some kind of rebound in productivity that comes from this technology that actually means we've got more jobs and we need that space anyway for more companies and more, you know, we'll need the space anyway. But you know, be interesting what buildings adapt readily to that, and which ones fall by the wayside.
So Richard, what would you think?
I've just that word that's in this question, and we've used quite a bit about you know, adapting, and the questions about how humans have adapted from working from home. But I think it should be, how's the office going to adapt to people working from home? You know, for me personally, you know, I've been working remotely, mobile for many years, and you know, for me to start working from home more recently hasn't really been a big shift for me, because I've been quite used to working in different places and having that choice. And I think what Charlotte touched upon is, you know, when you're at a certain age and you have a house with an office and things like that, it's a lot easier to work from home. You don't have, you know, well, I've got a dog running around, not a cat, Adrian. But you have distractions within the home as well, and people might not have the space. And for them, going to the office is as much an escape and getting away from home as it is about necessity to have the space to do it in. And I think, you know, moving forward, I think choice, and I think Adrian touched on it with how people work and postures and things like that, but it's about choice, and it's about giving individuals the choice in the right place to work. And it might be home. but it also might be the office. And I think we have to adapt not only how we work from home, but when we return to the office, how we will work in the future. And I think that ability to collaborate and communicate and using technology correctly. I think, a lot of people who are working from home now have never done it before and have kind of been thrown into it. And, all these different platforms that we're using, none of them are consistent, and struggle with, how many times have people been on calls and been on mute for the first five minutes, and people are kind of shouting, waving their arms, etc. And it's also about etiquette. We touched on it when we had a pre-meeting for this call about, what is meeting etiquette now when you're doing a Zoom call. And Adrian, I hope you see that I've moved the drinks cabinet out of the background.
I know.
Moved on to a can of beer.
But yeah, it is that etiquette. And I think as time goes on, I think there will become, a technological, a Zoom etiquette or WebEx etiquette, whatever you want to call it, as to how you can be more predictive on these digital kind of platforms. So I think, to kind of round this question off, I think, the office really does have to adapt, buildings have to adapt. And I think the people that are going into them will have to adapt, because the workplace is, going to change significantly from today.
I think a theme that runs through everything that you've all said as well is like you've just said, Richard, in the age and people getting used to working from home. It's not just the environment they have, it's the isolation as well. If you do live on your own and you're working from home, it's your mental well-being, it's your physical well-being, and it's how, in terms of not the failure of office design as it's been, but how's that going to work to bring people safely? And if they've got their anxieties about coming into a workplace, if you change and you look at a business looks at how they design and they work trying to get people back in, you'll have people that are eager to do it. They want that interaction. They need to get out, but you are going to have obviously the people that are hesitant about it and protecting them. So there's two sides of the mental well-being, not just the isolation and being at home. It's bringing them out as well. Those, if you've worked from home for quite a while and you've got used to it and you understand how to do it, manage your time, other people don't, or they've been thrown into it. They've got to step back outside of that little bubble they've built up around themselves, and it's how to safely get people back over as well.
Just on that, Becky, one thing about going to a destination, whether it's an office or whatever you want to call it, because we're not doing that, and I've not been doing it, you lose that daily commute, that drive, that 20 minutes, hour, where you're kind of adjusting from your home life to your work life. You've got time to read things, etc., etc. And we don't have that luxury now. So I personally now have been started driving my son to school, which gives me a 30-minute period in the morning in the car, and then 30 minutes coming back halfway through the day, and it gives you that ability to kind of adjust and kind of reset yourself from going back into working from home. So I do think that's another thing that it's not about the office, but it's about going somewhere and that ability to kind of reset yourself. Yeah,
I think it definitely is. And that kind of comes on to another topic, and again that's kind of themed through already in terms of productivity. So is it that we're talking about getting people back into the workplace and getting them out of kind of isolation, how central it is for a business in terms of, say, their ethos, their culture, the mentoring of staff within the company? Is the social interaction more important than individual productivity? If people are working from home and are they getting more done than they go into the workplace? What would be thoughts on that in terms of what is more important?
I think in general, humans thrive on community. We can't deny it. We are all social beings. And I think there's that happy medium where you've got to have some time when you do need that sort of privacy that you don't get in the open plan offices these days to be able to sort of focus on specific projects. But a lot of people need that social interaction to boost their productivity. And I think a lot of people have reported that productivity has increased with working from home, but I don't necessarily think that's sustainable for everybody. I think a lot of people will, you hear about Zoom fatigue and, you know, people sort of missing interacting with their colleagues and things like that. And I think we will, I don't know, we all thought it was for us a set period. And I think a lot of people will be able to keep doing it till the end of the year. But I think a lot of people want life to get back to a bit more normality next year. And if it doesn't, I think it will impact on a lot of people's productivity, just because they'll be broken, worn out by it, for want of a better description. You know, we can all keep going for so long, really.
Yeah.
I think while, you know, the clue's in the name to a certain extent, the workplace, it's not fundamentally about social, you know, surely it's about productivity, number one. But I'm not sure whether the social side of it is I think the balance is right. It's quite interesting that young people tended to be behind the drive for more flexible working prior to the pandemic, and older people probably were more resistant to change the ways and wanted to stay in the old way in the offices, and probably want to are more inclined to want to go back to the way it was, which I don't think is going to happen. But actually, their experience is the converse of that. I think the younger people have found it harder, you know, precisely because they're lacking that balance and that social side to things. They're lacking, they're not seeing what their colleagues are doing. They're not being party to the wider conversations that are happening around work. I wouldn't call that necessarily social per se, but it's certainly essential for productivity. I think actually, you know, it does feed back into productivity, and you know, if we're measuring productivity simply as the amount of time that you sit at a desk, which kind of used to be the case, I remember, yeah, you know, I remember it well. You know, or is it the quantity of stuff produced, which I think we can say is probably, you know, we're managing okay at home. But actually, it's back to what I said at the start. I think, you know, if we measure productivity based on the quality and the quantity of what we produce, then I don't think you can do that with, you know, purely working remotely. You need places where people come together and can share ideas and bounce things around.
Yeah. You're like Rich said before, it's when you work from home, it's having that on and off switch. It's having the definition of your start day, finish day. You're working from home. If you're dipping in and out, it can feel like you're probably working longer, but what are you productively doing? Does your productivity go down? Does it peak again? It's how can you gauge how productive you are when you are at home? Adrian, do you have any thoughts?
My hope is that it's something a bit more than a world just run by Excel spreadsheets, where everything's just measured on efficiency and what goes through. And as you know, with, you know, sorry if there's any project managers on the thing, but you know, where it's the idea, it's the spark, it's the innovation, it's the brand, it's the culture, it's the learning, and those bits that can't be measured are the bits that are actually the most valuable to the organisation. So the idea that I think rather than what has suddenly changed over the last 6 months, the whole idea that you have to go and sit at a desk for 40 hours a week in a particular space to prove that you're doing the job has just disappeared. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. It's what we now hope is that all organisations now recognise it's people just want sometimes the warmth of others around them. When we say the social workplace, we don't necessarily just want to constantly have conversations. You know, we still need to think, but it's that social point of just being human and having the warmth of humans around you, that if at some point you've got an idea, you've got a thought, that there is the opportunity to just express it and share it. And at the end of the day, just be human. So for me, that's one of the key things that has come out of all of this, is that the fact that we can't use the workplaces is kind of showing the bits that we miss, which is maybe the focus that we want to think about in the coming years?
Just on that area, with regard to that specific question that we've been asked about this social interaction, I'm concerned about how an organisation's culture will change in the future, because that social interaction that you have, whether it takes place in the workplace or whether it takes place after work when you go for a drink, or those interactions build trust with individuals and trust within teams. And, in my opinion, that's where you get innovation from. So that social aspect of going to the workplace, I think is really, really important. And even more so for, introducing a new employee to an organization who's never been to the office, that employees have been to before, and how they understand the culture of an organization. I think, to have worked with people, and, Adrian, I've worked with you for a long time, we've been in meetings, we've been in different types of situations in a workplace. So we know how each other works. And so for us to do it through a screen now isn't particularly difficult. And I don't think we would lose any innovation or any spark from that. And the same with my business partner. But if you've not had that physical interaction with people and working as teams, I think, we will lose something. How you measure it, I have no idea. But I think that's one of the biggest issues for us as an organisation working with our customers, as to how you can, through all these wonderful tools that we have, is kind of instill a culture within an organisation that really does stem from social interaction.
The identity as well is the identity of the business and the staff you bring in, and like you said, it's the culture and ethos that you have, the brand that you develop. But it's your identity when you work for a company and you get to know what that company is and what's expected of you. It gives you that definition of your role within that place as well. And those lines, you can imagine, will end up getting blurred, because when you're in a workplace and you're either being mentored, you're there, you can ask questions as and when they occur, kind of give you the parameters of where you sit within the company, what your role is, that you're comfortable and happy in what you're doing, that what you're doing is good enough, the anxiety levels of, am I doing enough? Because that's the other thing from a mental kind of well-being point of view. If you're at home, the pressure people might put on themselves for what they need to be doing, to be proactive, to be productive, and to show their worth to the company as well. That's an extra level of anxiety people have got on themselves, that they'd be getting that reassurance as they were going through the day, as they're interacting with colleagues as well. So it is an interesting one.
I think as well, when you look at graduates coming into the workplace, they don't just choose a job these days on what the job is. It's all to do with the company's brand, culture, and so many different things. And part of that is driven by the workplace. And a lot of that is then driven by what they've been used to at university. And I think one thing that I think through the social interaction, all the things that we've mentioned, that a lot of the younger generation are going to miss out on. The things that I feel that I learned when I first started working in office, just by listening to how other people interact on the phone, etiquette, so many different things. And that's not necessarily what you need to know to do your job. So my job as a surveyor, I didn't learn that, but it's just those sort of more adult interactions and things like that.
To be in the workplace, isn't it?
Yeah,
How to
exactly.
in the workplace, and
yeah, the value of that is massive.
Yeah. You might like you ask somebody else.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I think that the soft skills are very important, and they are learned at the office, like lots of the things that you will learn through your career. What you were saying, I think, is that people feel and act differently and has different needs. So I think that the way that we work and the settings that we need, they are completely different. Yes, we can just generalize it and say juniors versus like more experienced people. Maybe juniors, they will feel some way, but I think it's as well more like towards the individual. However, for example, I think that it all depends. For example, juniors maybe or younger people, they will need as well to learn. And I think that when you are not very experienced in some skills, when you are working from home, you can feel isolated and feel that the resources are not there. And maybe you're not going to be typing all the time questions to someone else because you're disturbing them, rather than if you are in the same room you always can kind of like shout that and say, hey, or just like by conversations around, you keep learning. I think that maybe senior people, they have way more commitments than home. And that is maybe why once we are working from home, it feels a bit more flexible and like we can adapt better. However, the social being is like a social person, and I think that being isolated is going to bring people down. I think that anyway, the design of the offices, what I should say is that now once what is design of workplace has been looking into putting different settings for people to work in different ways. So it's not just that we are creating a desk where we expect people to stay all day long. Within an office, we create like social areas, places to work on a desk because maybe people will feel more comfortable. Maybe pose the tables with stools, places where they are more like soft sitting and comfortable, like house resembling. So I think that even that maybe working from home, you are like losing all the commuting, and then you can do maybe some chores at home, or you have got your flexibility of your daily life. I think that the office right now, the way that we are trying to design it, is trying to give that flexibility as well. But well, I think that at the end it's going to be kind of like getting into being flexible. Companies, they will have to be more flexible, not maybe like bringing people to the office all the time, but I think that getting sometimes to the office is going to be important for just creating community, a sense of like culture, and then just making the team feel that they are together, that they have got someone next to them, that then it's going to be easier to work by phone or by computer and Zooms and things like this. So I would just move into one of other questions that we've got. So we have got that has employee trust of their employees risen over the past 6 months? And I would maybe just think that, yes, that Graham or Richard, if you would like to start with it.
Yeah, I think from trust of employees, I think it's probably what we've seen recently in some of the customers that we're working with is, and we've worked with for a period of time, is, we were having conversations 18 months, 2 years ago about occupancy within offices and people working from home, etc. And there was always this kind of hesitancy to really understand the cold hard facts of how many people were actually going to the office space. And we did a project in Barcelona, and we were telling the customer that the stats from people coming to the office was 50%, and we believed that we could significantly change their working environment, but they were so worried that there wasn't going to be enough places for people to sit that we ended up going more towards the 70%. So I think now people have realized that people can work from home. It's not too difficult. How efficient it is and how effective it is it's still up for debate, I believe. So I think from a trust perspective, I think employers, and I am an employer, and we've had people working from home, it's how you look at what they're doing, and how you communicate with them, and how you can gauge the output from them. And it's very easy if people are working in a call center or something where the metrics are very easy to quantify. But when you're working in our type of industry, it's about, and back to innovation and back to collaboration, etc. It's how, are we still getting that kind of result out of it? Are we getting that kind of, that thing that we're looking for, the X factor, that special piece? So, to answer it quickly, is I do think the employees' trust has increased. I think there is still out there this, view that when people are working from home, they're You know, are they really working from home? Are they doing the 8 hours that we pay them for? And I think people, you know, we're too quick to look at the clock and go, well, you have to work from 9 to 5, and you know, so what if someone only works 6 hours? If they're more productive in that 6 hour period because they're working from home and they can do the things, you know, they can go and take the dog for a walk, or they can go and do the things that make them, you know, their well-being better. I think they're far more productive, and I think it's how we can encourage that, and how employers, you know, can see that, you know, it's not just about the hours that you sat there toiling away. It's about, you know, what you're doing in those hours, and you could be far more efficient and far more effective from doing 4 hours as opposed to doing 8.
Yeah, but I would add to that, Richard. I think maybe, you know, my experience is working in a creative industry that employs graduates, and you tend to employ people that you know, that they're not there for the money for the most part. They're there because they really enjoy you know, what they're doing. They're passionate about it. So it's always struck me as a little bit odd that that employers wouldn't trust the people that they've employed to do the job. You know, that's despite, you know, when I started out, you know, I was sandwiched between a partner and an associate that had the beady eyes on me, you know, throughout the day. And I think, you know, the effect of that is it probably put me off my game. It probably didn't help them very much either. You know, I'm sure they had better things to do than keep their eye on the young graduate. You know, I think those days have gone. Certainly in my industry, I appreciate there's other things that you know, if you're managing a vast team of people that are doing a slightly less creative job, then it's maybe easier for people to sort of fall between the cracks. But I think the trend generally is, you know, as technology frankly takes a number of jobs out of the job market, I think the jobs that are left over for humans, if I can put it that way, will have a tendency towards being the more creative jobs, and that all feeds into the ability for flexibility and trust. So yeah, I think that's.
I agree with your point about technology, Graham, in the sense that, you know, technology, AI is coming as a means that will take a lot of the processing type of work. But I also think technology has actually had a huge benefit in terms of putting power to me and you as individuals, because all of a sudden, you know, I wouldn't want to be selling company switchboards at the minute, because the idea that every phone call goes through a company switchboard is kind of dead now. It's kind of, we've all been answering our calls on our mobile phone. And interestingly, I don't answer my phone. Hi, it's the Senator Group. You're now speaking to Adrian Campbell. You just say, hi, it's Adrian. So the power is all with me. And it's interesting, whoever wrote the protocols of emails did exactly the same. You don't get the company name first, you get your name first. So I think the COVID situation and technology has actually given us as individuals much, much more power. And maybe that can help to come through to build this trust in the workplace, that it can be designed for the optimum result, rather than just providing a space where people have to sit for 8 hours a day so that they can pick up a check at the end of the month. So I see a lot of opportunity for hope that might have come out of this current situation.
Richard, you got anything to add on that one?
Sorry?
Well, yeah, that's fine. Sorry.
No. I was going to actually say something. I was watching I don't know whether it was Graham Norton, actually. It was Fred Flintoff was on, and they were on about Zoom calls, and because people are predominantly working from home now, you haven't really got, and I use the word excuse, not to be on a Zoom call, because it's like, well, what else are you doing? It's not like you're traveling anywhere, or you know, and you know, that kind of people thinking that you are constantly available. I think before, people would accept that, you know, you had meetings and things like that. Now, because you're not going to a physical place to have a meeting, you could have, you know, 5, 6 Zoom calls in a day. So I think that, you know, if you then turn that to the employer trying to get hold of the employee, and well, I can't make that Zoom call today, and I can't do it tomorrow at that time either. It you know, it really can, you know, I think may cause this kind of trust issue.
I think another thing to sort of consider in this topic is that whilst it might be good for us, I think there's a lot of industries where it probably doesn't work. If you look at call centres, customer service centres, things like that, I know that when I've tried to contact services recently, Hermes, when they failed to deliver a parcel to me, I couldn't contact them because they haven't got the resource at the moment because their offices aren't fully staffed. And I'm sure that the majority of their staff are probably furloughed and they're not being trusted to work from home, and they will get them back into their office as quickly as they possibly can. So I think we just need to appreciate the different service sectors that are out there and different jobs that are available. The only other thing that I would add to it as well is that I think it's key that employers, if they have developed that trust with their employees at the moment, they have got to retain that when we get back to whatever normality is, and when people are back in the office, that trust has to be retained. Because once it's taken away, you'll never get it back.
Yeah.
That was one of the points I was going to bring up in terms of workplace requirements. They are going to be industry specific, so like you've just said there, Charlotte, that it is going to depend, and some businesses cannot function without people back into the workplace. They don't have an option of working from home, or, you know, they're having to think very quickly on their feet or use very reactory products such as Perspex screens. You can sit in a little hot box at your desk, but obviously there's that's not a long-term solution, really. It's not something you really want to invest in, but how can people kind of forward plan past that, or impacts on the environment as well? The amount of Perspex and acrylic that's out there at the moment, what are the long-term implications of that as well? And it's obviously thoughts around that. I mean, I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that as a kind of as a topic. And to
yeah, when you look at the environmental photographs these days, we've gone from a seahorse wrapped around a cotton bud to a turtle wearing a face mask, haven't we?
Yeah.
Which they're not joking matters, and that's a slightly flippant comment, but it's amazing how quickly we've seen the impact of the things that are becoming the everyday norm. So the face mask and things like that.
It is, and I think where sustainability had become such a strong focus as before we went into this, initially coming back, it seems to be being a question asked again, but certainly straight away, you know, hasn't been really much consideration for the sustainability of the products that are going out into the workplace. Obviously, health comes potentially higher than that, but it's obviously how things can be planned or the forward thinking around that as well. So we've got a question that we've had through from one of our viewers. So I'm going to ask the question first, and I'll see if anybody looks interested in it before I allocate it. So it kind of goes against what we're talking about, the future of the workplace and innovation and where we see things going. But as for the here and now, how can organisations maintain and leverage collaboration and innovation under existing virus conditions, assuming that the majority of staff are not working from the office? Does anybody want to put their hand up for that one? So is there anything that you've seen in terms of anything you've worked on at the moment with projects, or?
Well, I suppose one of the is just linking it in is, I will answer it in the best way that I can, in that the environmental side, it just, you know, it's kind of like the hazmat tape and follow the yellow brick road of plastic wherever you go down anyway. But I have heard some lovely stories about how through smart design you can start to provide socially distant spaces. And the best one that I've heard is plants. Why not just put pot plants on the air rather than a horrible sticker that is antagonistic and raises your anxiety? It says, do not use this. You know, a lovely plant that would just actually help you. So if you were wanting a collaboration space, rather than just the tape and the stickers and the do not use, just a plant that might help the biofeedback, that just might help you put a smile on your face. So those sorts of intelligent things, I think, are some of the things that, yes, we can marked space, but we can do it in a much smarter way.
Yeah, I think, yes, we could plan spaces to allow social distancing. I'm not sure the timing at the minute. It's not our only solution to this is to stay out of each other's way. So it's a very difficult one to square, and to put the need for collaboration ahead of safety is quite a difficult one to make a case for. However, I do think as this, one, we get a vaccine is got to be number, so there are bigger solutions. Two, in the absence of a vaccine, you've got to, testing has got to be the key, and that allows people the comfort to meet up physically. I think beyond, if you just accept that for the minute, we're not going to, all jump into a room to collaborate. Then I do think it's back to the sort of etiquette of using Zoom, and we tend to use it quite a lot, but I'm not sure that we're using it as well as we could, and I'm not sure that and I'm the technology will advance very, very quickly, so that we can have, I would imagine, a much more responsive. For instance, if I'm talking to Adrian, Adrian knows that I'm talking to him rather than somebody else, and I don't have to say every time in response to Adrian's question, or that kind of
The social
help us. Yeah, and I just think the technology will catch up. It's ahead of us possibly, but it will become an awful lot more intuitive and allow us to collaborate much better when we're not in the same place. But I'm hoping that it won't be too long that we'll be able to meet up in person.
No, it's a difficult question, because obviously we're looking to the future, and I think that's what everyone's holding hope that this is going to be short term, and that how we're working at the moment, virtually, socially distanced, spaced out, less people, splitting between the office, that it's going to get better. And I think that's what you're thinking, that at the moment, as things are, that is the way it is, and it's working to a point as it is, but it's how do we look forward to coming out of it and managing people's expectations as we come out of that. I think one of the things as well that somebody's asked is from maybe not so much from a design point of view, but certainly from a business point of view, whether future employees might ask how a company has specifically handled the lockdown situation, that might become something that, seeing how a company has handled the pandemic in terms of workforce, or how they manage people, getting people out working safely, how they manage to maybe not have as much downtime as possible and keep the flow of work. Could that be a positive selling point to kind of advertise how helpful they were and obviously that's going to be maybe looking at space and utilisation, getting somebody in to kind of give them that guidance and reassurance, seeking that advice. Do you think that would be something that
it makes you, sorry, just the thoughts coming to my head, it makes you wonder how people will react if that company said that their knee-jerk reaction was to close the office and everybody work from home. Boom, that was it. That was how they dealt with it, rather than trying to accommodate or work with people and found, they just sort of shut up shop, for want of a better description.
It's a difficult one because it was unknown, wasn't it? So it was a reaction, and it could have been a knee-jerk reaction, but if you've got pressure off
and arguably for some businesses, their cash flow just stopped, so that they've preserved the company and the jobs and their employees and kept them with a job by coming out of their office space and saving those overheads.
I think from my perspective, over the last sort of 7 months, we've been working with several organisations on preparing the office for the return of the workforce, and I'm amazed at the the differences between organisations, from some that I think have gone way too far and have really done it, to the nth degree, and organisations that I would expect to have done it better haven't. And there is a huge difference between the good and the bad. And I think, that specific question about, it is I do believe it would be a positive kind of selling point for an employee to understand how an organisation has adapted, not because of what they actually did, but the fact that they actually cared about the employees. And I've seen prime examples of it. And if I was picking an employer to go and work for, and I'd seen what I've seen over the last 7 months, it would definitely sway my judgment.
Well, I think that yes, I think it's a good point, because at the end of the day, people want to work for someone who they know is gonna care of them, take care of them. Well, I guess that there are two options. One, that maybe you will go for like a super important company that they have got a lot of name, and then they will explode you, but you will get the name on your curriculum and CV, and then you can go off from there, But normally, what would people like to be is in an office where they feel like that they are important, that they have a purpose, and that the employer is happy with it, with them, and then that they will take care of them, for example, if anything happens. So I think that would be important. So I would just ask another question. So I think that this one I will just start with Charlotte. How can innovation in office help the company to increase their sales? Well, if you would like to.
It would depend on the business.
Well, so let me ask you another thing. For example, how do you see, because you are with offices and buildings, and you see what is people requesting on your hand. So what they are looking for? Because, for example, right now we have got the hospitality is falling down, and then workplace is maybe not looking into expanding right now. Maybe are they looking into getting smaller offices, or are they looking into co-working offices? Or basically, are you, for example, trying to build buildings where the flats and the houses, they have got a communal area where they can work as a hub?
I think one trend that we are seeing, certainly that we've seen in Birmingham, is a flight to quality. So where businesses are looking for better working environments, so that's going to a building where the landlords have created a better environment as in the building as a whole. So it's not just your own office space that's better for your staff, it's the whole building. So with all the headlines of the office is dead and everybody's closing space, the office take-up in Birmingham is still doing well. And two sort of deals that we have seen recently have been with Knights and Mazars both taking space at Chamberlain Square, which is at the new Paradise scheme. So straight away, whilst on one side you're seeing businesses trying to save money, you've there got two businesses that are going for prime grade A office space, paying premium rents in the city to make sure they're getting the right space for their teams. In terms of co-working space, I might have touched on this earlier, but we've seen some requirements recently where people have, or the occupiers have considered both traditional office space and service space, but they do tend to be favouring looking at the serviced opportunities. And again, I think that comes down to, it's not just the lease flexibility that you can get in the service space, it's also the working environment that those providers have created. So, you've got a sort of coffee shop, you've got the breakout spaces. You can either work in your own office or you can go down to the collaborative area. The big question mark that I have with that, I know that our office here is a COVID secure office. So I know that everything in here, we've got the cleaner coming in, who's here now. We've got desks that are blocked off. So I know that what I'm touching through the day is clean and secure. Whereas if you go into a sort of collaborative environment in a serviced office, who last sat in that chair 5 minutes ago, that would be one query that I'd have with them, but it'll all come out in the wash, for want of a better description.
I wonder whether that co-working model becomes a little bit more collaborative over time. I'm thinking of people's personal bubbles. If you're right. Why would you choose to drop into a space when you don't know who's been in and out, and it's kind of counterintuitive at the minute. But if you maybe have 5 companies that all share the space, but they do, maybe they're the spaces need to be timetabled. The companies effectively need to collaborate, and might be that they're in very similar businesses or very complementary businesses, and it's effectively like an extension to your own company. So I wonder whether that's a trend that we might start to see, a more like a co-living model, where you have almost a created community for that for that building, rather than a domestic community. You're talking about a business community.
I suppose, if the question was how do you increase sales, I would say that it's about using different spaces to put you in a different mood, in a different frame of mind. And I'd bring it back to that home situation, that because everyone is in their homes for 24 hours, is we don't sleep in the kitchen or bath in the lounge. We've got specific areas set up to do specific tasks, that we don't use those rooms all the while. We don't worry about efficiency at home, the fact that the bathroom isn't used for 24 hours. We use those spaces when we feel it's appropriate. So if we're saying that we want to do something like increase sales, then we need to think, well, what's the best posture? What's the best type of setting? You tend to think that if you want to be lively, maybe it's brighter colours, it's bright. And just as how we use tones and finishes to create the right mood and behaviours in our homes, then maybe we'll see more of that in the workplace, as people are more accepting of the different spaces now that they've been in them for 24 hours a day. So I think it's down to how we can look to design space in the future.
Points this evening. Is there anything that anybody else, in terms of what we've touched upon, that they'd like to go back to and add a point to, or any final thoughts on the overall topic question? No?
The thing that I was going to comment on earlier, but then we sort of moved on from it, was when Graham was saying about different where office space is and putting it in different locations. And Birmingham's a prime example of something that you said, whereby there's very much a CBD office sector, and then there's a retail sector. And then the sort of two have never really mixed, but it is starting to change. But it's so noticeable in Birmingham at the moment, because so many people are working from home and they're not here. The CBD is so quiet, it's eerily quiet. That there are people about and that there is stuff happening, but when you consider what it used to be like at the beginning of the year, it's very, very different.
And by contrast, the small towns and villages that we're used to seeing vacated during the day because everybody was commuting into town, and the high streets were completely on their last legs, are seeing a wee bit of a renaissance, which and I think that's a rebalancing that's been absolutely needed for a very long time. First, it was retail was the overly dominant for there are voids opening up all over that. And if you add a little bit of office, dare I say, to that mix as well, then we've got the opportunity to transform city centres in fullness of time, to back to something where you live, work, you play, you do everything. Why are we not putting health centres and schools and everything else into our city centres and making them places that people want to be? And that's what people want from a workplace. Surely they want to be part of something.
Yeah, I think the one hope that I've got from this whole experience is that people will actually realise what's important and what they really value, and that can then, you know, in the bigger picture, can be brought into city centre design, office design, things like that, so that everybody's an individual. Everybody works in a different environment, and some people might be better sat in a beanbag, and you know, somebody else wants to sit at a proper desk. So yeah, I just hope that we all learn from it in a way.
And that's the biggest kind of message and lesson, isn't it?
Yeah.
So no, fantastic. Thank you very much for everyone who's joined us this evening. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. We've had quite a few questions, so what we're going to hopefully do is post some of the questions to the panelists after this, and then make sure we get those up on LinkedIn to follow up from this, so that everybody's had a chance to have their say. Thank you very much to our panelists for the discussion. I hope you found it insightful. Thanks for your time and expertise. And maybe we'll see where we are come March next year, and we'll all get back together and see where things are by then, and see if we can see a marked difference, or just keep checking back and seeing what people think.
Yes, it was a pleasure to have you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.